Welcome to our third digital town hall, everyone, on the freedom and struggle for democracy. So I have a very upbeat voice because I'm extremely excited to be hosting this town hall with Andrea and speaking to Joshua about this. I think it's especially key right now in times of coronavirus and with everything that is happening. As he just mentioned, in Hong Kong, I think last weekend, there were dozens of pro-democracy activists and opposition politicians being arrested once more, and too often the international attention is not on those battles, is not on those events, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Governments are turning their attention away, and so it's really key for us to discuss democracy, freedom, and how the international community and people across the world can help. And who better to discuss this with than Joshua? So thank you for joining. Just to let you all know, during this event, we'll hear from Joshua about the situation in Hong Kong, about the campaigns he's working on. We'll talk about how coronavirus is impacting democracy and the struggle. And finally, we'll hear from him about what we can actually do to shape the world of tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Colombe. I will invest 1 extra minute on presenting Joshua to our audience. So as you probably all know, Joshua is a pro-democracy activist and politician. He actually started his first protest in high school. Especially it was noted in many of his bios how he struggled against the moral and national education school curriculum addition from China. It was tried to be pushed in the Hong Kong system when he was in high school, among which things China tried to hide the massacre in Tiananmen and present the Communist Party under a favorable light. So that was the beginning of the story for Josh. And from then on, he became one of the leading figures of the umbrella movement in 2014, which struggle and activism brought him also to prison because he suffered imprisonment, but also worldwide notoriety for his pro-democracy advocacy. In fact, in 2017, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And more recently, in 2019, he played a decisive role in pushing the US Congress to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. Since then, the struggle has continued, and he's nowadays, as you know, still on the forefront of the battle. One last thing is that since 2016, he's the General Secretary of the pro-democracy party Demosisto, that he also co-founded. And Colombe and I are going to be the moderators of these talks. We are the co-founders of NOW, the movement that is hosting the call, while Laura and Bettina, our team members, are respectively managing the tech side of the call and the social media interaction. Having said that, Colombe, you can fire the first question. Yeah, on mute, Colombe.
Sorry about this. I was saying we talked, I think, a bit enough. We all want to hear from Joshua. So Joshua, I mean, let's get straight into it. We want to hear from you about the Hong Kong situation. It used to be on the front page of all newspapers a couple of months ago. And now, in my opinion, we don't hear enough about what is happening in the crackdown. So we wanted to hear your take to inform the international community here in the call.
Crackdown on protests in Hong Kong never stopped even during the outbreak of coronavirus. At least 15 prominent Democrats and lawmakers have been arrested by the government last week, which is really surprised us. It's really crazy for Hong Kong police to arrest the 81 years old Democratic camp leader Martin Lee, which is father of democracy. He's the one who helped draft the Hong Kong Basic Law under one country, two system. And for almost 4 decades, he has been promoting democracy and human rights in Hong Kong. And apart from Martin Lee, Jimmy Lai is also one of the most high-profile pro-democracy media tycoons, have been critical of Hong Kong government and Communist Party leadership. And he was also invited by the Secretary Pompeo and Vice President Mike Pence to share Hong Kong situation. And I think with such situation happen in the recent days, Hong Kongers still keep on our fight in such uphill battle. When China officers in Hong Kong unprecedentedly announced that they are not restricted from interfering in local affairs of Hong Kong, it's beyond any doubt that this sense it's beyond any doubt that the situation in Hong Kong will still escalate under the hardline suppression on Beijing. And when all countries are now busy combating coronavirus, the authoritarian regime of China is now clamping down on democracy movement in Hong Kong. And I think that's also one of the reasons for me to join this conference. I call upon the world to keep watch on Beijing's suppression and hope people can stand with Hong Kong.
Thank you so much, Joshua. It's clear that because of this crisis, many authoritarian governments, namely China, but also Hungary and others that we can see around the world, are clamping down on democracy and rights. And in this sense, I would like to follow up on Colombe's question and ask you, how did coronavirus change the struggle? Because clearly it's actually a moment where activists like you have to take the lead once more to push back. And I've seen on your Twitter that there was some work done online, even in game forms. So how is the struggle changing during social confinement and the outbreak?
During the outbreak of coronavirus, which might be difficult for us to mobilize people take to the street, but I'm still optimistic that people will reassemble to the street again on the upcoming summer. Especially the first anniversary of the protest in last year, which means 2 months later, I believe more than 1 million of Hong Kong will take back to the street. But in the recent few months, apart from how we spend the civil society development, no matter import surgical masks around the world to Hong Kong, or how to help the underprivileged people or elderly by ourselves instead of rely on the Hong Kong government that override public health by national pride. What we try to do is to let people to know that pro-democracy camp are platform for freedom and democracy. We can also strengthen the civil society development and overcome the public health crisis with unity and solidarity. And not surprised that, of course, for international media, keep the Hong Kong under global spotlight since last summer. But after the outbreak of virus, I recognize and aware on how people around the world put more focus on Beijing. I remember there's one hashtag around the world is China lie, people die. And of course, this is just one of the slogan, which can conclude and sum up the whole complicated dynamics. But how China being the one who manipulate on WHO, just taking benefit from the world globalization development, but never recognize the importance of transparency and check and balance. No matter scholar, doctors in China as the whistleblower being targeted and suppressed by the government, or how the number of confirmed cases in China is never true at all. So I think it's time for the Western world to have more analysts on what's going on in China. And without the universal value, such authoritarian regime will just widespread the global coronavirus around the world.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned Western powers need to also be able to stand up to this. And you know, last year, I believe you went to the US Congress and you were instrumental in pushing for the US Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. Some questions we got on social media ahead of the talk were linked to this, to how much you think that foreign powers actually helped so far in the struggle and how useful it was, for example, for the US Congress to pass this, and for other governments, often to a lesser extent, but to make statements in favor of Hong Kong.
We hope to seek for bipartisan support around the world, because supporting Hong Kong is not a matter of left or right, it's just a matter of right or wrong. And that's the reason for us, no matter when we interact with politicians in the Capitol Hill in Washington, or how we travel to London to meet with those MPs or etc. All we hope to do is to deliver how Hong Kong people are determined and deserve democracy. And with the international dynamic, I would say that without uncertainty and the situation of the US-China trade war in 2019, I don't believe Beijing government will accept to compromise and completely withdraw the controversial extradition bill on last September. So some of the people might doubt that. Hong Kongers just rely on foreign force in this movement. I would say that no matter our uphill battle on the street, during the election, or on the global community, we just have to maximize our bargaining power and let Beijing to know that as the second largest superpower around the world, which is really important for the for people to realize that China do not respect on liberal value and international order. And about the question of so about the question saying that the fight against Beijing can be won within the Hong Kong system, I would say that no matter within the Hong Kong system or how to seek for overseas ally support, which is also important. And with such arrest and crackdown on protests, will Hong Kong government suspend or cancel or to override the election result on the upcoming September, which is the Legislative Council election? I think that's also the critical issue.
Thank you so much, and thank you for picking already a question from the audience. I will ask a follow-up question on what you just said, and then we can jump again in the chat. I think it's really clear that the international community can play a role or should play a role in this situation. And my question here is more about supranational organizations. So we understand some foreign powers have done some steps in the crisis, but what about the UN, like similar international organization? And I pick on this because I've seen your tweets, a lot of criticism against the World Health Organizations and its, let's say, approach towards Taiwan and Hong Kong. So I would like to hear you elaborate a bit on the situation.
I can't think of any international organization that is more worse than WHO in the recent situation. Yeah, and how WHO is being manipulated by Beijing and just try to isolate Taiwan and to serving the interests and the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party, which is crystal clear. But I think for other INGO situation, no matter UN Human Rights Commission or how European Parliament have issued a statement to show the support on Hong Kong and also urged member of the European Union to stop the exportation of the weapon and equipment to the Hong Kong riot police, which also is a good step in 2019 summer. But more important is I hope to let more people to reflect that in the previous day and even what we learned in the textbook of high school always will embrace and to endorse the advantage of globalization. Of course, we recognize there's lots of advantage and it's also important to strengthen and to build the global community to get a global civil society and community together. But how China or authoritarian regime will also take advantage from the process of globalization and to export some of the authoritarian value to this kind of international platform or to country around the world and result in kind of a retreat of democracy or the rise of populism movement. Those are also the factors that should be recognized by people.
Sorry, go for it, Andrea.
No, I was thinking there is really a really important reflection that the globalization does not only support sometimes struggle, but actually is also the cause of many injustices. We'll go for Colombe.
Yeah,
no, completely. And I really want to bounce back on supranational governance as well into this. But first, I want to bring to you a question from Simon in the audience, asking what you think the implications of the arrests of pro-democratic party members will be on the elections in Hong Kong later this year.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, will Hong Kong government cancel the election or override the election result on the upcoming September, which is the issue that we might need to face, especially in 1997, the first year after the transfer of sovereignty of Hong Kong. Beijing has the track record to move the legislative of Hong Kong from Hong Kong to Shenzhen to mainland China and to decide the Hong Kong legislation and to amend the law and the ordinance of Hong Kong in Shenzhen instead of Hong Kong. So what have done by the communist authorities in 1997 to set up the emergency legislative council and to appoint lawmaker without election and to decide Hong Kong local affairs? Will it happen 23 years later in 2020 after September? I think that's also the critical factor when we always emphasize the importance of separation of power. But now Hong Kong government and Beijing might consider to move the legislative council, move the parliament or the Congress of Hong Kong from Hong Kong to China. And this will just result in a tremendous erosion on the universal value of Hong Kong.
That's incredibly worrying to hear. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on your position on that, meaning will you be able to stand for election first if they are not moved? And in case something like this happened, like they're cancelled, then what will be the answer of you, your community, and your movement?
We urge with the experience of how Beijing barred me to run for office, disqualified my candidacy, or even kick lawmaker that represented my activist group Demosisto, kick the lawmaker out from the Legislative Council, even is elected by people. It just implies how political screening already become part of the daily life of activists or politicians in Hong Kong. But if you ask what my prediction in the upcoming future, how will be the expansion of the scale of the political screening and the disqualification, and let's see how the international community reaction in the upcoming summer. Before the election, if more of the global community participants and stakeholders stand with Hong Kong, it would just put more pressure to Beijing, just like what happened during last summer and autumn. And one point I would also like to add is after the mass arrest happened and the crackdown on last week, the Speaker Pelosi just openly urged the President Trump to implement the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. And I believe, apart from sanction, how to implement such mechanism and let Beijing aware that when they need to erode on Hong Kong's freedom, it's not only the matter for Hong Kongers, even the global community will stand with Hong Kong, and Beijing should hesitate on the backfire around the world.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely something we want to deep dive a bit more in here, because apart from governments and what they should be doing, so for example, putting in place such mechanisms across the world, not only issuing statements, but making sure there are some concrete mechanisms, what would you say that people across the world should be doing to support the struggle for democracy in Hong Kong, but also elsewhere? And just to qualify quickly, in just a couple of seconds, we are just in this call from, I think, over 3 continents. People that actually want to take action, want to make sure that we support Hong Kongers in this struggle. What can we do?
Okay, so with the outbreak of the coronavirus, I believe now is the time for the global civil society to urge Chinese government to bear the responsibility and to be accountable for how they lie to the global community and result in the pandemic of the coronavirus from Wuhan to country all over the world. At the same time, with how Hong Kongers are planning to gather on the street again and reassemble in the upcoming summer, it's time to stand with Hong Kong, no matter show the support on social media or on different kind of, just like Animal Crossing. Also, which is really critical and important to through the existing mechanism, no matter urge your government to stand firm with Hong Kongers, or how the Congress or Parliament should take a tough approach, never kowtow to China. I think those are the issues that should be recognized, and also the things that should be aware. And not only leaders in United States, even for leaders in Europe, I believe how they could stop the exportation of the revenue to Hong Kong, which is really important. As we know that how Hong Kong government has already purchased equipment and weapon from France, and will France government authorize the permission to transport and to export those weapons to Hong Kong and to enhance the police brutality in Hong Kong, now is still uncertain. So I think even for the civil society in Europe, they can also stand with Hong Kong.
That makes
and
a lot of sense. Go, Joshua.
Yeah. And one part I would like to add is about the World Health Organization, WHO. Just like what the op-ed that I published today in Hong Kong Free Press about what's my point of view on WHO. I think that's also a good question. Is I think there's lots of joint project for Hong Kong activists and Taiwan activists, especially facing the growing politicization and the suppression from Beijing. Because even, of course, Hong Kong and Taiwan have different kind of historical path and cultural background. But I think how Taiwan is being isolated by China in the global community. And it's time to allow Taiwan into the WHO. At least it could save more life from the virus, and which came from China. And because now it's Beijing who lies and just trigger such tremendous crisis around the world. So I think in the upcoming future, how to enhance the solidarity and unity of Hong Kongers and Taiwanese people, which is also important.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and I think that you have a really valid point. It's not only, you know, from a value standpoint, really the right thing to do, but it could also save a lot of lives, and that's something that is completely ignored in the current status of the game. I would like to steal a few minutes before you have to run away, trying to jump a bit more in your personal story and understand a bit your personal point of view outside of obviously the advocacy that you do. And I have two questions for you in that sense. One is a really general question. Do you hope, or are you optimistic that before 2047 there will be a universal suffrage election in Hong Kong? Because I mean, this is the polar star that is guiding your work. So I want to hear your take on that sense. And second, linked to your struggle, you have been already jailed a few times. Do you still feel that this something can happen every day? Do you feel there's an imminent threat? Or do you think that the situation is a bit getting better thanks to the international community attention?
I'm optimistic. Hong Kongers one day can enjoy freedom and democracy, and the government can be elected by people. Just like during last summer, no one could expect that the controversial extradition bill will finally be completely withdrawn by Beijing government, as we are confronting the second largest of superpower and the largest authoritarian regime in the world. In such uphill battle, of course, always we might feel downhearted, depressed, and hopeless. But I think even we have no hope towards the government, but we still have hope towards people. And with the remarkable achievement in last year, no matter past the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, or even forced Beijing and President Xi Jinping compromise to Hong Kong people, I think it's just encouraged more and more Hong Kongers, especially as one of the activists that engaged in young activism for almost 1 decade already. I observed lots of millennials. They are even braver than me. And now we have more than 8,000 people were arrested in Hong Kong, and more than one of them are students, and most of them are less than 18 years old. And they might be arrested, tortured by those riot police, and even young schoolgirl because of joining the protest, result in big gang rape by the riot police, but they still never step backward, which really impressed me a lot. And as even I need to face the court case on May again, and might need to face the risk that might be jailed again in 2020. But compared to others, like one of my friend, Edward Leung, the leader of the localist camp, is already facing 6 years jail terms in Hong Kong. The price I pay is just a small piece of cake. So how to continue in such uphill battle, which also matter to Hong Kongers and also matter to the world.
Thank you for sharing this. I mean, we can't even imagine what it must be like, but I think that Brilliant in the chat, who just asked a question, might be a good way to actually find a way for us to support. Sorry, I mean, Wang Wing asked how we can keep the attention of the international community on the democracy crisis in Hong Kong amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And considering the fact that you mentioned what you're facing, what your friends are facing, what other protesters are facing, you know, the least we can do across the world is make sure that we put the attention and that we keep it on your battle. So how can we do this?
In Hong Kong, of course, without the mass mobilization on street, we understand the reality and the difficulty to keep people attention on Hong Kong. But under the outbreak of coronavirus, even international media or global community can't put attention on Hong Kong. At least it's a must to put attention on what's happened for Beijing and what kind of problem and the trouble that have made by Beijing. And with the pandemic, virus might at least still continue in the upcoming few weeks or few months. I think it's time to let the whole world to learn a lesson, how to hold the accountability of Beijing government. And Hong Kong is just a small remarkable cases, but it also implies what they have done to Hong Kong just result in 2020 what they have done to the world. Without the transparency and check and balance, they can generate any kind of trouble far more than any kind of imagination or assumption.
Thank you, Joshua. I think that we are processing this wonderful suggestion and advice, and I think we, as a movement, we will look really into it to try to translate it in concrete action campaigns, because we feel really close to this button, and obviously we are talking with you. We really would like to do more than just social media posts and be on a video conference. I want to point out that our campaign manager just launched a little poll for participants to answer how they feel about the talk. We still have just 3 minutes before you have to jump off. So I would like you to leave this space to you to offer your closing remarks, any thought that you have. And I think that if you want to also have like a place to start from, is an interesting question from Alexei in the chat, basically on how and if you are trying to gain support from mainland China. So not only the international community, but actually within the Beijing camp.
Yeah. Mainland Chinese immigrants to Hong Kong show lots of their support to pro-democratic camp in Hong Kong in last November election. And especially in the last November election, we enjoyed the landslide victory. 85% of the seat in the district council voted by pro-democratic camp, including the district and the some of the community that with lots of immigrants from China. And since last summer, even some of the intellectuals in China also show some of the concern and support to our movement to urge the government to completely withdraw the extradition bill. And with some of my sharing is, since I engaged in street activism at the age of 14, I've been arrested for 8 times and being jailed for 3 times. When I was still in high school, I can't imagine the happened of umbrella movement 6 years ago. But even as the junior student in university a few years ago, I can't imagine the civil unrest happened in Hong Kong in 2019. But always social movement is the process to turn something impossible to be possible. And I think apart from anti-authoritarian crackdown, Hong Kong protest is also about youth activism. How millennials and Gen X, apart from using Snapchat and Instagram, they could be the one who take to the street, stand on the front line, and never kowtow to the one uphold the power with the authoritarian ideology. That's why I hope Hong Kong can be one of the remarkable cases to inspire more people around the world, be the change we want to see. Yeah.
And I think you have already done this to such an extent. I mean, you have inspired us throughout the years, and I know many people on this call. And as soon as we mentioned that you would be speaking today, we received so many people from literally messages, from people across continents, from Africa to Asia to Europe and South America, telling us they were inspired by your courage and that they decided to take action following your example. So thank you for this. And I just wanted to mention that Laura, during the call, launched a poll asking if after this talk, people believe that the international community should do more to support freedom struggles. And she just texted me the result. 100% of participants believe that we need to do more, which I think goes exactly to the point of this conversation. And we'll be looking to make sure that we actually, as a movement, support this battle and find a campaign to launch to support what you're doing. So thank you for this, and thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you, Joshua. And after this plebiscite, good luck for everything, and stay in touch, be safe, and keep on inspiring the world.
Thank you.
Ciao, Joshua. Thank you.
You.
So much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Laura, I think you can end the call now.
Yeah, just to close before we disconnect from Zoom, thank you so much for participating. We let Joshua run away because, as he said, he's extremely busy. He has a lot of campaigns and actually real fight to carry on. I hope that the talk was inspiring. It was definitely for us. And the topic itself is, as we said, really, really close to our hearts. So we'll try to work more on that. We'll try to launch our next campaign in areas similar or close to this struggle. And thank you for the many questions. It's been inspiring as well to read like the participation that you have put into this chat. Obviously, if you like what we do, follow us, join us, become part of the movement. Do your own movement. If you believe in the same thing that we do, but you don't like how we do it, it's fine. We just need to unite and fight ahead across many fields, from democracy to our pro-environment battles, to the pro-rights battles that we have already launched in March for women's rights. So there are many battles that we can, that basically mankind is facing. And, across borders, we should really unite to try to tackle them.
And on the last practical aspect, I know we didn't get to tackle all questions. Unfortunately, we only had half an hour. As I mentioned, this talk could have lasted for 10 hours on this topic. But the conversation is not over. So you can keep on tweeting on our Twitter at Joshua, and he will hopefully answer. We'll keep on discussing on our internal platforms the campaign that we mentioned. We want to launch a campaign to support struggles for democracy. We're looking at the best ways to do it, not just to achieve social media impact, but actual change. So come on board and help us find a solution, and we'll be working towards this for the next couple of months. And yeah, we can't wait to change the world with you all. So thank you for attending this call.
Thank you.